Good morning. Welcome to February's Accountability and Performance meeting. Welcome to the members of the public joining us this morning. I'm Jonathan Ash-Edwards, Police and Crime Commissioner for Hertfordshire. I'm joined by Andy Prophet, the new Chief Constable of Hertfordshire Constabulary. The purpose of these meetings is to help me discharge my duty to hold the Chief Constable to account for the work and performance of the Constabulary. We do that openly and transparently, so the meetings are available to the public to watch. The webcast is in watch-only mode, so there's no facility to ask questions, but you are very welcome nonetheless. The purpose of these meetings, as I said, is to look at accountability and performance. They are strategic in nature, so they don't cover individual cases where there are established mechanisms for any concerns or issues to be raised. And they are designed to be constructive in nature and to look at the progress the Constabulary is making on issues of performance or public interest. Got 3 items on this morning's agenda. The first is to discuss and hear from the Chief Constable on his first few weeks in office and priorities. Secondly, we'll be revisiting firearms licensing. And thirdly, we'll be looking at a recent joint targeted area inspection of the multi-agency response to children who are victims of domestic abuse in Hertfordshire. And we'll take the items in that agenda order. So firstly then, welcome, Mr. Prophet, to these meetings. You've been enrolled for a few weeks now, started on New Year's Day. And I was keen, and I know members of the public listening will be keen to as well, to just hear your reflections on your first few weeks in office, how things are going, where you've been putting your initial areas of focus.
Well, thank you, Commissioner. Good morning. And it's great to be here. I started as the Chief of Hertfordshire, as you know, on the 1st of January. So it's day 20 in month 2. And I suppose my immediate reflections are I'm enjoying it tremendously. I've been made to feel incredibly welcome by everyone in the Constabulary and outside the Constabulary. And what I've been doing over the last few weeks, I've been spending a lot of time getting out and about and talking to people in the organisation, because I think it's really important as Chief that I understand what the officers, the staff and the volunteers in Hertfordshire do day in, day out to keep communities safe. So, for example, on day 2, I did what I described as my grand tour and visited many of the offices and stations around the county, which was fantastic. In the second week, I quite deliberately and consciously and hugely enjoyed it. Went out and did a night shift with the teams. Because I think, again, I'm a constable. Yes, I'm the Chief Constable, but understanding and walking alongside my teams is really important to me. On Sunday, I'm going to be enjoying going to the briefing and working with the commanders doing the Watford and Luton game. And again, in East Herts again next week, I'll be out and about with the team. So that's kind of some of the visibility bits I've been doing and getting to know the people and the work we do. I suppose in terms of the business, my reflections, working with my senior team, I've been looking really hard at how we record crime in Hertfordshire. And as you're aware, Commissioner, we had an independent report last year that said we needed to do better, and we are, but that's a real focus for us, so we get crime recorded accurately and investigated promptly and victims well looked after. So we're doing an awful lot of work, and there's a lot of focus on getting that right. And I've been spending, as I said, lots of times talking to community leaders, voluntary groups and businesses to understand how we work together to make Hertfordshire even safer. So I guess my overall assessment, Hertfordshire is a great organisation full of good people. And my job and my focus is on what I describe as 3 things: training, trusting and empowering the people to do the very best they can do to do their job, which is what they're passionate about, looking after people, keeping people safe. The mission I've set the organisation: prevent crime and harm, number 1. Second, arrest criminals and solve crime. It's not complicated, really, this policing lark, and build public trust and confidence. That's what we're here to do. Keep people safe, catch criminals and build trust and confidence. And we're going to do that by looking after each other, working really cohesively as a team, getting the basics well and making common sense decisions and communicating with the public and our partners as clearly and as candidly as we can. So I'm hugely enjoying it. There's lots to do, but there's lots of positivity, and we're going to make Hertfordshire even safer.
Fantastic, thank you, and I really welcome the approach that you've taken to that and your first few weeks. And I'm sure members of the public watching will be reassured by your focus and the mission that you are setting as well, because it very much chimes with what I hear from people in Hertfordshire and what people are wanting the constabulary to focus on. You touched around the crime recording aspect being one of your areas of focus that obviously came out of the inspection. How's that going, and what are the changes in the progress that you're seeing and wanting to make to that area?
Thank you. We're making good progress, Commissioner. When the constabulary was inspected, the finding was only 82% of crime was recorded. We were missing 18% of crime. Missing violent crime, missing some reports of sexual crime, which is clearly not where the constabulary wants to be. There has been really significant progress in that, in the process to make sure crime is being recorded. There is a monthly performance oversight group chaired by the Deputy Chief Constable in Hertfordshire. The last data we have suggests that we're recording something between 90 to 92% of crime. I'd like it to be more than that. My aspiration is that we're recording all crime. I'd like us to be outstanding in the level of our crime recording, which probably suggests we need to be consistently in the high 90% of crime being recorded. The work we're doing to get that right is we've reviewed the end-to-end process, and we are going to train and put a few more people right at the start when the public contact us to record the crime at the outset. So there's no doubt what we're doing. We won't leave it to chance. Get it on the books, get it investigated, and get the victim looked after. So that's what we're doing, and we won't be resting until we've got that right, because it's hugely important.
Yeah. Thank you, and will be something that the inspector themselves will come back and relook at, as we previously heard from them. That's useful. Thank you. And I wanted to just pick up on the points you made around your visibility and empowering the organisation, and I wanted to just probe a little bit more around how you're broadening that out across the kind of leadership team beyond yourself, and what that will look like for officers, and therefore what that looks like for members of the public in terms of the service they get onto.
Yeah, no, it's really important. So I've been really clear with my very senior team, the Chief Officer Group, that we need to be visible and connected with the people we lead. So I have a fortnightly Chief Officer meeting. That's not locked away in an office here at Welwyn Garden City, Police HQ. We go out and about and hold those meetings in stations around the whole of Hertfordshire, and we spend the first hour and a half starbursting out around the buildings and talking to people about their experience of doing the job. And we come back, and the first half an hour of our meeting is talking about that. So how well are we supporting our teams, and what more can we do? And looking through the leadership levels, so down into the kind of the operational leaders, officers and staff, that's what I've said to all of them. You know, I want us to think about how we spend time understanding what our people are doing, what they're doing brilliantly, and support and recognise that. So this afternoon, Commissioner, I'm at a regular award ceremony where I give officers, commendations, recognition for long service, and that happens across the organisation. And taking a really positive approach on our external and internal communications about celebrating success. Yes, learning. Yes, being determined to improve, but recognising when we do things well, because I think that's really important. So, yeah, a really big focus for me. Let's be connected. Let's lift people up and train them and empower them to be even better.
Great, thank you. In terms of that sort of longer term mission that you referred to, how are you going to measure the success and impact of that? Obviously, we'll look at some of the aspects of it through meetings like this, but in terms of how you kind of take a view as Chief Constable about, are we on the right track? Yeah. Is that having an impact? How are you going to approach that?
Commissioner, it's a really important question. I'll look at a range of measures. So number one, I said we have to record crime accurately, and then we can say, well, let's look at crime. Are we going up or down? Because we want crime to be going down. That's probably a core measure. Are we arresting and solving more crime? We should be. We should be solving more crime in Hertfordshire. About 12% of recorded crime has a resolved outcome. I have an ambition that's far higher than that. So that will be another key measure of success. Do we retain high levels of trust and confidence in our communities? I think some of the survey data I've suggested that we do have high levels of trust and confidence. Something in the region of 78% of residents feel that the constabulary does a good or excellent job. Well, I want to not only sustain but improve on that, because I think that legitimacy is really, really important. And then how are we feeling as an organisation? How well am I leading, and how empowered are the organisation? We will be introducing an annual staff survey. The first one will be in May, and it will be anonymous for those that want it to be anonymous, and it will ask those questions. Are you feeling led? Are you feeling supported? Do you have the training, the skills, the equipment you need? So I understand how the 4,200 people who I'm responsible for are being looked after. And I guess, these meetings, the public meetings that we'll be going to, and what communities are telling us, what the independent inspectorate tells us in terms of how we're doing, will all be measures that we'll look at. So that's a long answer because it's a complicated answer. All of those things will be things I look at throughout my tenure.
Lovely. Thank you very much. And we'll look forward to looking at some of those through these meetings as well, and seeing some of those changes coming through. We'll touch on it a little bit later, particularly around children relating to domestic abuse. But one of the things that comes out, it kind of relates a little bit to your point around reducing crime and harm and improving outcomes, is around the work that constabulary does around protecting vulnerable people, use of protective orders, those sorts of things. What are your reflections from the first few weeks around the progress being made there? Further work still to do?
There's a huge range of protective orders that we have available to us in policing that we can use. To highlight a few, if I think about the domestic abuse arena, Clare's Law is a right for a victim to be told or to ask about whether they're safe in the relationship they're in. Historically, the constabulary wasn't very proactive in using those right to ask, right to know Clare's Law legislative options. So in 2023, only 41 applications were processed. There's been a huge investment in that, a team put in place, because this keeps people safe. A woman is murdered by a man in England and Wales every 3 days, and Hertfordshire clearly isn't immune from that kind of domestic violence. So because of that investment in 2024, and I'm not satisfied with this, but over 150 Clare's Law applications were made. In a similar way, domestic violence protection orders and notices, which is an option available to officers to put controlling measures on suspected domestic abuse perpetrators, weren't used as proactively as they might have been. So if I go back to 2023, Hertfordshire was, of the 42 forces in England, Hertfordshire was 35th in our use of those. In 2024, we are up to 18th, so we're making far more proactive use of those controlling measures. And there's a whole range of legislation we can use, and we will, and we are, and we track and monitor the use of those powers at our monthly force performance oversight board. I'm working really carefully and closely with the partnerships. So there's a domestic abuse partnership in Hertfordshire, there's a safeguarding children's board partnership in Hertfordshire, and making sure that we understand how referrals are made and how we work together to prevent harm to children and the vulnerable is a key focus for us.
Thank you. And it's an area that I think is incredibly important. It provides a huge amount of opportunities to keep people safe, but also to intervene early and to prevent harm, doesn't it, when things first come to the notice of the police or partners. So it's really, really good to see the continuing progress being made there, and no doubt further to be done. Lovely. Thank you for that overview. I'm going to move on to the second agenda item then on firearms licensing. So this is something that I looked at in one of my first accountability and performance meetings last year. It was an area that raises quite a lot of correspondence and complaints from the public that is continuing to be the case. And so I wanted to come back to it. I know you've been doing a fair bit of work on it over the last few weeks. Essentially, what I hear from the public is really, really slow timescales in terms of decision making for firearms licenses. So I see the performance of where we are, which is one of the lower forces in the country for timeliness. Obviously, some really important aspects around public safety and ensuring suitability of license holders. It drives a lot of concern from members of the public. Certainly, I've got examples in my inbox of applicants from the end of 2023 still waiting a decision. So perhaps if I can ask for an update on the work you've been doing looking at this and where the constabulary is dealing with this issue.
Commissioner, of course, and at the outset, the members of the public who are emailing you are right. The service we have been providing historically in the firearms licensing, issuing of new licenses or renewal of licenses have not been good. It's been too slow. And I'll give you some figures and some context around that. We have a plan to correct that, which I'll tell you about. I think, being candid with you, Commissioner, it will probably take us 6 to 9 months from now to make get through some of those backlogs. So firearms licensing in Hertfordshire is a collaborated function with Bedfordshire and Cambridgeshire Constabulary. In total, across those 3 counties, there are just short of 30,000 firearms licence holders, of which just over 10,000 are in Hertfordshire. If I look at the data on the 12th of February, there were backlogs of 1,061 renewal applications in Hertfordshire and 549 new applications. So about 1,600 people waiting to hear from us, and that's not acceptable. The average process time for a renewal, someone asking for their licence to be reissued, is 244 days. Far too long. And the average process time for a new application is 324 days. Far too long. Now, so what are we doing about it? That's the key question. In the last couple of weeks, we have reviewed the end-to-end process. How is it we go about risk assessing? Because clearly that's really important. Someone asking for a firearms licence for the new time, that the public of Hertfordshire would expect me to have a process to make sure the right people do get firearms licenses and the wrong people don't. So we've reviewed that process end to end, looking for efficiency. We are being incredibly proactive now at looking at how we can use technology to streamline and automate some of the searches and checks we need to do, which will be things like checking the police national computer. Has an individual being subject to criminal behaviour? Are they vulnerable in some way that might have an issue on their suitability to carry a firearm? So we're looking at technology. We have increased. I put 11 more people from Hertfordshire into the firearms team about a week ago, who will, once they are upskilled and trained, which we're doing at pace, will allow us to transact and process more applications more quickly. And we've also reviewed the decision-making levels, because previously across that team, which works across the 3 counties, I've said there are only 2 people empowered to make decisions. It was a team of 39 people that was locked by only 2 decision makers. So more people, more decision makers, of course, properly trained. This is a serious business we're doing here. I think we'll start to unlock some of that. But in answer to your question, Commissioner, we've got a plan. It will take some time to work through, but we will improve on what has been, in terms of timeliness, a poor service.
Thank you for that update, Chief Constable, and appreciate the rigour that you brought to that work over the last few weeks. And those figures are considerable on there in terms of numbers of outstanding applications, but also that average renewal timescale in terms of numbers of days, and obviously that being an average, that's not going to be the worst affected either, is it? So. Positive to have that being relooked at and to hear some of the immediate decisions that you've made around resourcing and decision making capacity as well. I suppose one of the questions that members of the public will probably have is people have heard that before, and so in terms of the kind of monitoring of that and the rigour behind that, what's your confidence level around that being the thing that makes the difference in terms of getting timeliness down, and how are you going to be monitoring that as Chief Constable?
Thank you. I have got one of my chief officers chairing a weekly accountability meeting, looking at how much we're processing, how the backlog is reducing, and I will be talking to them every week. So it's that hands-on for me, because this is such an important issue to get this right for the 10,000 people in Hertfordshire who own a firearms license, and the 1,600 of them want an update from us. So that is how I can have assurance that I will understand what is happening. My level of confidence that this will start to shift is high. It's slightly more uncertain about how long it will take us to work through some of those backlogs, because some of it is dependent on smart use of technology. I know that technology exists, but it's about getting it in and getting it applied in a proper way. The one backdrop you expect that I will of course have is I will not compromise safety. The reissue of licenses must be safe, but I am confident we can improve from the poor position we find ourselves in at the moment.
Thank you, and clearing that, as you said, is the priority. Thinking then longer term, obviously clearing a backlog is key, but also putting in place, as you've alluded to a bit there around technology, kind of more sustainable systems and processes. Is also key. What work's being done to think about that longer term of how do we get that service onto an even keel? A lot. In answer to the question, now in February, many of your listeners who are firearms holders will know that the licence fee was increased by government, which means that more income can be drawn into the constabulary, which means I can invest more into the people, the training and the technology to streamline and get this service right. It's a really active work stream at the moment. How are we going to get the right systems and the right database? There's work nationally to look at this, which I'm obviously watching incredibly closely, but I'm not just waiting for a national solution to land and like a magic rabbit out of a hat appear. We'll watch that really carefully, but we are proactively working now, looking at our systems, looking at what technology we've got to how do we automate that process. So, for example, let me just describe that. So at the moment, you might have a person at a desk going, Mr. Smith has asked for a licence. I'll search this database, the Police National Computer. I'll search this database. I'll do that. I'll cross-check it with this. Technology can automate some of that. And that's what we're looking to do, how we wire those things together so the information is provided to the individual who can then look at it and make a kind of a person-based decision. So we're working incredibly hard at that. Thank you. And that answers quite nicely the question I was going to come on to, which is the question of how that increase in the licence fee will be spent. And obviously, members of the public who write to me on this issue are wanting to know that. And so essentially the assurance you're giving is that increase in the fee is being spent on the service and it's being spent on improving the service. I'm really clear that any money that we are asking, or the government has asked members of the public to pay, should be invested in this bit of business to provide the right service back for them. So yes, okay, thank you. That's reassuring for people to hear. One of the things that comes out really clearly when you look at some of the complaints that come in on this topic is around communication with applicants and updates, and I see kind of quite often in the complaints, members of the public saying quite reasonably that I've made my application, I've done it in the timescales I was advised to, I get told there'll be a decision, but actually I don't hear anything. It's very difficult to get an update. That obviously goes in part to the size of the backlog and the pressure that team's been under. Is the work being done to improve communication and updates to applicants and try and reduce some of that kind of lack of contact in the system? There is work being done, and I don't think we cracked this right. So I know that on our website, you will get kind of a stated message on there explaining the fact that there's significant backlogs in work and the timeliness is taking a long time, which is it's one level of information, but isn't particularly reassuring, I think, in terms of that. The work I've asked the team to look at is how we're more proactive, where we know we've got someone who has a pending and overdue application, how we're proactively updating that individual. So it's a bit more of a bespoke service. So we haven't got there yet. That's what I've asked the team to find a solution for. So the 1,000+ people who are waiting for their renewal ought to be having some kind of expectation
understanding of how long they'll be waiting for. So we're working that through, Commissioner, at the moment.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful as well. And then on the sort of public safety side, which is a really important part of this, and obviously some of the work comes out of some of the recommendations from the incident in Plymouth a few years ago.
That's right.
The importance of those checks being rigorous. How are you assessing the quality of decision making and indeed understanding any risks to public safety where actually the delay is resulting on someone being on a temporary permit for longer, and those full kind of checks at the point of renewal taking longer to make?
So everything I've said to this point is the timeliness has been poor. The quality of the checks that have been done, albeit taking far too long, have been really good. And I say that with a level of independent assurance because, as you know, commissioners and chiefs for the three collaborated areas, Herts, Bedfordshire and Cambridgeshire, asked an independent audit firm back in February last year to come in and look at our processes. And they I'm pleased to say, gave us a high level of assurance that there was grip and rigour around the checks that were being made to make sure that the whole system was safe. Quote unquote, commissioners and forces can take substantial assurance that the controls upon which the organisation relies to manage this area are suitably designed, consistent, applied and effective. But they're too slow. So we won't compromise the safety, but we need to accelerate the rate at which we get there. There is one area of risk that we are managing. In the last year, the constabulary has relied too much on the issue of temporary licences, which is a short-term licence. In effect, we're going to stop doing that because it's managing failure in a system working properly. You keep having to go back to it to reissue a temporary licence, so it's in itself inefficient. So I'm confident the processes are tight, Commissioner. We will be moving rapidly away from issuing temporary licences and getting back into the full, careful, substantive and timely issue of full licences.
Thank you very much. That's what I know will be reassuring to members of the public to hear. Recognise it's going to take some time to get there, given the updated figures you've given me today in terms of the backlog number of applications outstanding, but appreciate the focus and grip that you've been applying to this over your first few weeks, and no doubt it's something we'll continue to keep a very close eye on.
I will. You're right.
Thank you. No, likewise. Okay, we'll move on to then the third area on the agenda, which is the joint targeted area inspection of the multi-agency response to children who are victims of domestic abuse in Hertfordshire. So this was a joint inspection by a number of inspectorates, both the police inspectorate in relation to the policing aspects, but also Ofsted and the Care Quality Commission, and I think in relation to probation as well, in terms of some of the roles that those agencies and organisations have in relation to this issue. An incredibly important one of how are children kept safe who might be victims of or in a home where there is domestic abuse in the county, and that joint report found, I think it'd be fair to say, some pretty good work going on across Hertfordshire, across the partners, some robust partnership working, really effective interventions to keep children safe, and it was pleasing to read that, and there's a positive commentary about the police's role and indeed the role of other agencies in that partnership. There's also a few areas where the inspectorate have made some suggestions and some recommendations, so it'd be useful to talk through some of those as well. Some of those referred to the police specifically, some were for other agencies, some were kind of more for the partnership, so it's not all policing specific. I suppose perhaps if I could just ask to start off with what your kind of general reflections were on the report. It builds on some of the points that came out in the constabulary's inspection anyway, and so work was already going into to those areas. Perhaps if you start with your kind of overall reflection on what the report was saying.
I mean, it goes without saying, I've read the report. It's a really important report on how police and partners work together to protect children. it is, of course, right up there in terms of priority. So some context, if we think about just the domestic abuse risk to children, Hertfordshire receives between 60 and 70 calls a day that may be a crime or maybe just a wider concern for welfare of domestic abuse. And about half of those, there's children involved. So that's what we're talking about. We're talking about 30 or 40 times a day a domestic abuse risk where children are involved. I think the report, the joint targeted area inspection report, is really good. It's got some really clear recommendations of where we're good and need to keep being good and where we need to focus on being better together. The answers are very often about that partnership. So how, as agencies, we share information, assess information together, and then react quickly and effectively together. And there were some really key bits that Hertfordshire Constabulary need to do better in that space that I'm sure will be keen to explore with me.
Lovely, thank you. I wanted to touch on first the point that comes out in the report and indeed in the Constabulary's inspection report in the autumn was referred to there around the consistency and quality of referrals being made, particularly around where there's cumulative risk or dynamic risk. Can you give me an update on, that wasn't new in this report, that was kind of work already ongoing. Can you give me an update on the progress being made on that issue?
Yeah, we are in the process of this month and next month changing how we do that fundamentally. What happened previously is an officer or member of staff went to an incident where a child may be at risk and used one of the internal police systems. It's called Athena. It's our crime recording risk management system to capture the information about the child, about the risk. They then sent that to another police team, the referrals team, who took information out of that system and sent it to a relevant partner, children's social care, a school, probation, whoever it might be. That system was clunky, slow, and led to things being missed. What is happening as a result of a practice review? So we got round the table and said, this isn't working, how do we do it better? Hertfordshire Constabulary will be making referrals into partners, interesting as every other partner already does in the county, using the Children's Services Portal, which is a bespoke professional portal built by children's social care professionals, which has built into it all those risk assessments, all those kind of escalating contextual risk assessments that are highlighted in the report. So it makes it very easy for attending officers to give the right information because they're prompted to do it. So, as I've said, we are currently building the process and the training for that to happen. Staff training is ongoing from the 24th of February through to the first week in March. And at the end of the first week in March, we'll start operationalising and using that system. And it will give us contextual management information back as well as to partners. So in a nutshell, using the proper system designed for the specific purpose of looking after children and catching the risks around children, we will do better at it.
Thank you. That's positive to hear. Probably leads me on to the question around the voice of the child, because I guess that's probably something that portal and that system is going to want to really capture. One of the things that comes out in the report is perhaps a point around detail and consistency of capturing children's views and children's voices when officers end up at an incident that have children involved or children present. How will that system or wider work being done improve the understanding and the consistency of the understanding of children's views when they are living in a domestic abuse context?
It's really important, and it comes back to the point I recognise that, the officers and staff who I asked to go out 365 days a year, day and night, to attend domestic incidents. Sometimes they can be really chaotic, really dangerous, really tricky, and sometimes talking to children, if you've got arguing parents, for example, can be quite contextually difficult, and I think we can all understand that. But nevertheless, it's important. They've got lots of tools available to them, common sense, their voice and their ears. They've got body-worn video where they can capture all sorts of information, including the reaction of children. They can assess the house or the environment where that domestic abuse incident's in. But in addition to that, on the specific point of capturing, when we say the voice of the child, what's the impact of this potential offending behaviour on that minor? We've been training officers since January through to March about the importance of that and how they can get that right and do their very best they can. And we've also clearly been, as I've said, planning to move to the Children's Services portal, which then prompts the officers more directly to feed that information in. So I think that two things, the awareness, the training, and the portal will mean we get that, well, we should and will get that better than we have done perhaps in recent years.
Yeah. Thank you. And I've certainly seen when I've been out with officers, really good work being done where there have been incidents involving young people, to really caring and really understanding that and as you say, that training and the systems done a key part of that. In that training, how does that help officers understand some of the sort of trauma-informed principles behind what a young person or a child might be experiencing? We know that very often, by the time the police are called to a domestic abuse incident, that's not the first. Very often, children will have seen and heard a lot by that point. So how are officers being supported to understand the kind of trauma behind that child's experience?
Well, it is fundamentally part of the training to, as best you can, to understand that what's the impact of a domestic abuse, for example, going to have on a 7-year-old. So the level of awareness we try to give them is such that it's relevant to the job they do, not to be oblivious to those risks, but clearly that they're not trained to be nurses or child psychologists. So it's finding that balance of making sure their awareness levels are up, that they're aware of obvious signs and symptoms, withdrawal. Will a child speak to you? How does a child process that information? So it's trying to develop their skills and understanding, and I think they do a brilliant job, and they do a brilliant job. But if I reflect back to when I started policing a little while ago as a 21-year-old, there was lots about the world I didn't know. So there's a real kind of important bit here about helping the men and women who do a remarkable job to have the skills and the understanding and the insight that we don't always all have at the start. So that is part of that kind of development and training for them.
Thank you, and I think that's important, and that kind of link to professional curiosity and inquisitiveness and things is really key, isn't it, in terms of that kind of wider safeguarding approach. Perhaps if I could just broaden out from that around kind of protection of children more broadly, and the constabulary's work around child protection. What's your assessment so far of where that work sits and kind of your focus or areas you want to look at further around next steps?
So I've already described, obviously, the work we're doing around some of the protective measures, the use of the Clare's law we talked about earlier, use of domestic violence protection orders, and those are really important kind of areas that we're focusing on in terms of the domestic abuse arena. But wider than that, the safer neighbourhood teams that we've got across the county have a really clear role to play in understanding what's happening in communities, being visible in parks, being visible in town centres, being aware of some of the risks that can happen in schools and working really closely with schools. So there's a real kind of preventative approach to where risky behaviours can start to happen. We all heard about the awful incident, didn't we, up in Merseyside a few months ago, where that individual stabbed those young girls. There were opportunities there potentially to identify individuals at risk, and that's something that the constabulary is working with partners to understand. Who are the individuals at risk? Who do we have habitual knife carriers, and how are we overtly and proactively policing those individuals? But also, how are we, and this is really important, how are we engaging with 6, 7, 8-year-olds and just talking about, just general safety messages, safety online, the dangers of carrying knives and not carrying knives. So I think there's a whole range of things we've just got to do in partnership to try and tackle the kind of the undercurrents and the drivers of things that can cause risk.
Thank you, and I agree with that, and yeah, I think really important work to ensure Hertfordshire is a safe place to grow up and be a young person. There is some really good work going on. I mean, the mini police programme that Constabulary does, I've seen some of that firsthand. Absolutely fantastic programme to engage Year 5 children around safety, around trust and confidence in policing. So lots being done, but as you said, lots to do as well on that. Thank you. I think that's probably covered the points that I wanted to raise on that. I think that multi-agency work in Hertfordshire, I think, is strong. You described the work that Constabulary is doing, both around protective orders and some sort of systems, things to add value to the Constabulary's work on that, and look forward to seeing the impact of that coming through, and indeed considerable progress being made around protective orders, and long may that continue. So thank you for that. I'll draw the meeting to a close there. We've gone through our 3 agenda items for today. The next accountability and performance meeting is in the diary for the 1st of April. We'll be looking at some different topics there, and I'll just close the meeting by thanking you, Chief Constable. Thank you for the work you've done in your first few weeks, and the grip that you've applied to some of the issues on the agenda there. And I'll thank members of the public for watching. Hope you found the meeting useful. I'll close the meeting there.